Hello! Welcome to the SharePoint Framework and JavaScript Special Interest Group Biweekly Sync. It is November 8th, 2018, and we've got another great meeting here for you today. For folks that might be new to the call or new to watching the recordings, we always like to talk a little bit about what these are all about. So these calls are part of the larger SharePoint Patterns and Practices program, and we started these Special Interest Group calls so we could provide a little bit deeper focus on certain topic areas, because we had a single monthly community call that we just had too much stuff to cover, across all of the work we're doing in patterns and practices to fit it all into a single call. So we started these bi-weekly community calls. We have this one, which is focused very much on SharePoint Framework and client-side development patterns associated with that, and as well the PnP JS libraries, the Office 365 CLI, the SPFx reusable controls, and something not new. It's been worked on now for a few months, but new to this call that we're going to be bringing in and talking about on each call is the new SPFx Community Yeoman Generator. And so this is something Stefan is hopefully going to be doing a great demo on a little bit later on this call, pending some device issues. But this is it's an extension of the out-of-the-box SharePoint Framework Yeoman Generator that provides a few more options and some different capabilities than the out-of-the-box one. But it's an extension, so you're going to get a valid SharePoint Framework project out of that, but it's a very cool thing, and we'll talk more about that later on the call. So we hopefully will have the demo and a bigger discussion around that. So a very cool thing, definitely worth checking out, especially if you're looking for some capabilities that might not be in the out-of-the-box SharePoint Framework Yeoman Generator. So two links down there at the bottom, aka.ms/sppnp-community, will take you to the Microsoft Tech Community, take you to the SharePoint area of the tech community there, and that will it's a great place to ask general questions. How would you architect things that might not necessarily be specifically related to a given library or a given project, but is something that you want to ask. We have a question around SharePoint. That's a great place to go, a great starting point, and folks from there usually can either answer your questions or help point you towards folks that can. And I'll just remind folks, do please join the call on mute. It really helps us out with the recording. Second link there, aka ms/spdev-docs, will take you to all of the SharePoint developer documentation. So whether you're new to the SharePoint framework and looking to get started with that, the tutorials, you can jump in there. But as well, if you're working on add-ins or the WSP package model, absolutely the documentation for that is there as well. So definitely check that out. And you can, from those pages, provide feedback and ask questions on that documentation. So if you see something missing or something isn't clear, let us know, and we, of course, do our best to get things resolved or improved just as quickly as we can. So the agenda for today's call, engineering update on SharePoint Framework. We'll do our patterns and practices updates. And then as well, we got the demo from Stefan on the SPFx Community Yeoman Generator that I was mentioning before. And we will keep that, hopefully. I'm not seeing him back on the call, so we're fighting some audio issues on his end, so hopefully he'll be back for that. And then we'll have a little bit of time, I think, today at the end for Q&A. So always, before we get into things, I'd like to talk about opportunities for all of you in the community to get involved in the SharePoint Framework and the JavaScript Special Interest Group. The first two are demos, so demoing a SharePoint Framework solution, demoing any of the @PnP resources in an application in SharePoint Framework or without. And that includes the CLI, of course, the PnP JS libraries, the new Yeoman Generator, if you've done something to improve that or got a neat use for that, or as well the reusable controls. So any of that stuff, love to see the demos. The demos are, I think, one of the most valuable parts of this call, and that we all get to learn from each other, and we all get to see the great work that everybody out there is doing in the community. So really encourage you, if you've done something or you're working on something cool and you'd like to do a demo, you think it's something neat to show, please reach out to us. We will do our best to find you a slot in an upcoming call. It might not always be the immediately next call, for example, but we'll do our absolute best, get you signed up, get you a slot, and get you an opportunity to demo your work. So very much encourage you to do that. We welcome those demos. I think they're super valuable for all of us to see. The other ways to get involved, you can always contribute on GitHub across any of our projects that we mentioned here, all of which are accepting pull requests, are accepting, obviously, the reporting of issues, and those things really help improve stuff and make it better for all of us in the community, make it better for everybody in the community. So those contributions are very welcome and very valuable and very much appreciated. So keep those coming. We've, across everything, seen a big uptick in the last couple of months on contributions from folks out there in the community, and that's really outstanding because it gets improvements in and develops new capabilities much faster than the folks in the core team can necessarily get to doing everything that even we might want to do or think is a great idea. It's just sometimes a time battle for us. So absolutely welcome those contributions. And then finally, you can always provide feedback on what we're doing. So feedback on these calls, feedback on the documentation, on the samples, on the various libraries. That feedback is always welcome. It's something we take to heart. We do discuss. We do our best to adjust and improve. Again, it's not something we could always react immediately. So if you don't see a change as soon as you report the feedback, trust me, we do listen to it. We do take it to heart. We do take it back and discuss it and do our best, even if change sometimes is slower than would be ideal. So with that, we'll hand things over to Vesa for the SharePoint Framework update from engineering. Vesa, take it away.
Excellent. I'll just kind of take the presentation on here and let's actually load here. So, cool. A few kind of a generic slides, which I always do. So first of all, repeating the classic slide. So obviously AKMS SP dev docs. Actually in October, we were in 960,000, so I didn't update the view. So we're pretty close on hitting the 1 million marker in SharePoint dev documentation, which seems to indicate that people are finding that location useful, which is always good. But if something is missing, please let us know. If you need to have additional guidance on something, please let us know, because your input truly matters here. We're not going to write any documentation which is not meaningful, because every single piece of documentation requires also maintenance, and that's maintenance is always then increasing our workload. So please, if something is missing, let us know. Now, the second thing what I wanted to remind everybody is the AKMS SP dev issues. So if you're running into dev issues, API issue, functionality issue, please use this to report the issue for us. We right now have a support personnel who are doing the initial triage, and if it's a critical issue, they will flag that right away. We are falling significantly behind of doing a active triage on this, mainly actually because we are looking into shipping SharePoint Framework 1.7 quite soon. So we've been kind of prioritizing the delivery of 1.7 on top of the issues, and that's a hard call, but it's also related on the fact that we need to prioritize our time as well. Now, let's actually quick update and a reminder, if you're an MVP, if you're looking into submitting, or if you want to have additional visibility through, for example, the SharePoint Twitter channel, which has 220,000 followers, please use this opportunity of submitting a suggestion for having a PnP MVP in the SharePoint Dev blog, and there, if you go to the SharePoint Dev blog, you can actually find an article which will explain the process. So please send us an email with a suggested content, so we can actually see if we get it out or not, from there or not. Now, on the SharePoint Framework usage. So just a kind of a small update on this one. So this is the latest charts. It includes yesterday's usage, and we did a all-time record once again on Monday. So we keep on breaking the record on every single Monday around around the users using third-party custom web parts or extensions in SharePoint Online. So basically this Monday we once again did a all-time record. We have now grew 449% since the start of this year, and year-over-year growth is 481%. So it's a pretty insane growth, especially considering that already a year ago at this moment, SharePoint Framework passed SharePoint add-ins in SharePoint Online on the usage. So we're by far the #1 customization model in the whole Office 365 with SharePoint Framework. So if you're kind of considering, are people actually writing new stuff on this? Oh yes, they are. And we can see that massive uptake also during this autumn, which potentially is related on people accepting the realities of, okay, SharePoint Framework is the future after SBC on Spring, and then Ignite further encouraging where we're heading with SharePoint Framework. So we in engineering, we build all of our stuff using SharePoint Framework, so it's pretty safe to bet on SharePoint Framework because the whole SharePoint Online is built using SharePoint Framework. So you get the same tooling, same functionalities, same packages for you as well. Now, quick update. I didn't do any update on this slide, just a note on the 1.7 release. So 1.7 will happen quite soon. I can't give you an exact time or a date at this point, but we're talking more dates than weeks. Is the right now the estimate on this one. So we're looking into obviously getting 1.7 out early on before the holiday season starts in US, which starts in Thanksgiving. And so that there's plenty of time for people to give us feedback, because there's quite a few items on the dev preview. And we've been already in this course, we demonstrated the domain isolated web part roughly. We also demonstrated the provider hosted solutions and app pages actually in this course. So today what I wanted to do is to show the SharePoint Framework components in Teams, but up to the level of what does it mean in practice to develop this, because I'm not going to take too much time other than this, rather show you what it means that I have created a web part in SPFx and how do we actually make it happen in the Teams. So, but before we go there, quickly explaining, Kemi has a good question, what are list subscriptions? It's basically your web part or an extension can say that I'm interested on events on a single list. So whenever there's a new item or an item is changed in the list, your web part or an extension will be notified. So basically you can subscribe on live events on the list. So it's basically Socket.io, but using our terminology on that. Now, but on the Teams development, and really before I go to the actual demo, let me explain why we are doing this. So obviously you saw the success of SharePoint Framework. So we can see a massive uptake on the adoption of SharePoint Framework, which is great. A lot of our customers and enterprise customers are using it, and their usage is growing all the time. So obviously the Microsoft Teams is one area of the collaboration platform in Office 365. And one of the key challenges in the Microsoft Teams platform have been the fact that if you write a Microsoft Teams tab, you need to figure out where do you host it, and how do you control the permissions and manage everything, every single aspect of that application. So sure, if you have access on Azure subscription, you can easily create a Azure application, and then you can manage the permissions using Azure AD. But that's really easy potentially as a developer, but that's not actually super easy for enterprise scale or in enterprise level. So if I would actually go to, let's say, a random oil company in Netherlands and say, hey, can you give me access on your Azure subscription? I need to create an application. I need to manage your Azure AD. The answer would be obviously no. And I would have to justify that ask. I would have to explain the ask and what does it mean, and there would be months and months of evaluation. Will they accept that or not? So we want to simplify. We want to simplify deployment and hosting for developers, and actually development as well itself for SharePoint. For Microsoft Teams tabs. So what we've done here is basically that we are now enabling the SharePoint Framework solution or SharePoint Framework web part act as a Microsoft Teams application. So you're using the exact same tooling. You're using the SharePoint Framework tooling, the modern industry standard tooling with NPM and Yarn and all of the packages and Office UI Fabric to give you styling. All of the reusable controls and everything else are in your consumption. And then you're publishing the SPFx web part as a tab within the teams, and you get all of the benefits of the SharePoint Framework development as well. And all of the benefits meaning automatic hosting, automatic deployment from behalf of you. For example, the Azure AD permission management through SharePoint Framework. All of that stuff without the requirement of actually going to the Azure AD and getting the web application and hosting and sorted out and all of the additional things and all of the costs related on hosting and all of that. Well, let's actually use the SharePoint, because if you have Microsoft Teams, then you have a SharePoint Online as well, even though you wouldn't be using that necessarily. Well, typically people are. So let's actually utilize the existing costs and the model what you have without any additional requirements. And this is really, I would say, this will enable normal developers really truly start designing applications which are then can be surfaced either as a SharePoint Framework web parts or as a tabs in Microsoft Teams. And this is really, really cool. Now, because and quickly coming on Stefan Mumalo's question related on the workbench. So technically what you're building is a web part. And let me show this one in practice. So let me actually jump on my screen and hopefully screen sharing and everything works. So I am sharing this monitor. Yes. So let's see. Somebody needs to confirm when you get the screen. And this is, I'm going to explain what it is actually. Confirm. Hello, Simon.
Got it.
Excellent. Thank you, Patrick. So what I've done here, I haven't done anything more than I just wanted to save time on the scaffolding. So what I've actually done here is that I've scaffolded a web part. So I've scaffolded a SharePoint Framework web part, which is a standard web part. It actually has the welcome to SharePoint message and everything else. There, when I run this in Yeoman, let me actually get in here. So let me do md test cd test yo Microsoft SharePoint. So what I actually selected in the, let me zoom this slightly so you can see that. Whenever the Yeoman actually executes, come on, run. There we go. So the only thing what I actually did here is basically I targeted SharePoint Online, and just to be super clear, I'm running 1.7 version, which is not yet available. You can't see anything yet. You can't get this to your environment yet. It will be released soon. This is the new choice of the environment. So I can obviously we kind of target SharePoint Online because this is preview of the tabs development in SharePoint or in Office 365. I'm going to use current folder, and then what I'm saying is that I'm going to use a tenant-wide deployment that eases up the setup and no domain isolation. And we are creating a web part, and let's call that something, and description, and then it's a no JavaScript framework. So there is no option in the Yeoman which you would say, no, I want this functionality to be targeted teams, because we don't actually have to isolate that. We can use the exact same piece of code as a web part or as a Microsoft Teams tab. And that's the beauty of the thing. So because in general, when you think about Teams, when do people actually use Teams? Let me actually close that one. There are people who use Teams, and then there's people who prefer SharePoint. So basically our kind of a messaging from our side, from Microsoft side, is that, well, if the Teams is more suitable for you, use Teams and then surface the pages and everything else in the Teams side as a tabs. If the SharePoint feels suitable for you, if you're a larger customer and you want to have a portal, yes, please use a communication side and build your portals using communication side. The beauty for us as a developer is that you use the exact same piece of code as you surface your functionality in either side of the game. So either in Teams or either as a SharePoint web part. So it is right now, well, the base classes and everything else is a web part. So I haven't done any modifications in here. What I'm going to do is that I'm going to make this aware of the context. So I'm going to do small modifications, and this all is going to be in the hands-on labs, which will be released together with a 1.7. So I'm going to add a on init on init method here, where I'm actually then using this context Microsoft Teams get context. So if you ever implemented anything on Microsoft Teams, this is how you figure out the context of the tab. What I'm doing here is just basically storing then that context in the Teams context property, and then I'm going to implement a render, which is kind of letting us know, am I being rendered either in Teams or am I rendered in the SharePoint side. So here, if the Teams context has been set, we know that we're in Teams. If the Teams context has not been set, we're in SharePoint. So, and then we're going to modify the welcome message based on that. And that's it. Basically, that's it for the code. Technically, the out-of-the-box piece of code would work as such as a Teams tab as well. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to actually jump. Let's save the changes first. I always forget about doing that, and then I'm wondering why I'm not seeing any changes. I'm not going to do any debugging exercises in here. Let me actually open up a terminal here, and let me actually package this one. So there we go. Let's do call up bundle --ship. Bum japadum bum bum bum. And that shouldn't take too long, but you can hear me singing while we wait the call bundle to do its job. Oh, that went really well. Oh, yeah, that makes a lot of sense because my stylings are now. I basically copy-pasted the code from the tutorial, and the name of the style is different. So let's actually fix that. That's a fair point. That's on me. See, I can still code. I'm not just a PowerPoint PM. That's my way of coding, actually. So. Level of a code with what Vesa can do now. Well, probably I can do slightly more than that, but let's not tell anybody. Cool. So let's actually bundle that. And then let's get back on some of the questions slightly later, so I don't actually lose them. And then because I want to actually walk through the whole process, so you understand how it's then being exposed. What I'm going to do now is obviously packaging the solution, and I'm going to do the --ship, so I don't have to worry about running the local host, and everything will be packaged automatically to the Office 365 CDN or served automatically from Office 365. And that's it. Now we are ready to go. And let me actually make sure that this one is working. So I'm gonna, let's actually hide that left navigation. There we go. So let me go to the SharePoint folder, SharePoint solution. There's my Teams tab, SIG SPFx. So now what I'm gonna do is that I'm gonna jump to the context of the tenant. And let's actually test that web part. So let's test the web part first in the SharePoint side, and let's put the same web part to work then in the Teams, and I'll show you the process how to make that happen. It's insanely super easy. So first of all, this was a tenant-wide deployment, and there are considerations. Do you want it to be a tenant-wide deployment or not? If you put it as a tenant-wide deployment, it means that the web part is automatically available in all of the SharePoint sites. If you don't want that, you could actually hide this web part to be only visible in that particular Teams as a tab if you want to do that. So there are options of kind of scoping the visibility of the web part, absolutely, like we have in the SharePoint framework as well. Now that's now done, so that's being deployed. So let me actually create a page here so we can test that it's working properly. Random site in my tenant. It was a tenant-wide deployed web part, so it should be visible here. If I write something related on SIG, it's my cool team SIG demo. So it's aware, it works. It used the asset packaging. I packaged all of the JavaScript files inside of the SPFx file. I don't have to worry about hosting. I don't have to worry about deployment. It works as a web part. Okay, that's web part. What about Teams? So how do I actually get this one in Teams? So let me get back on the file system, and well, actually let me get back on the Visual Studio code side, and let me extend the Teams folder. So by default, when you scaffold a web part, starting from 1.7 version, we actually also give you a manifest file, which we set the configurations and everything else automatically based on the web part you're using. So in here, this is a typical Teams manifest file. It references a certain images, which we need to double check. There's apparently a new way of associating icons in Teams, which we missed. And it sets all of the GUIDs and everything else accordingly based on the solution what you're doing. So you don't actually have to worry about what's in the manifest file. it's a complex file. But you're basically ready to go as long as you deploy your Teams manifest to the Teams. So let's actually do that. So I'm going to go to the Teams folder. I can see the images, I can see the manifest. Let me actually create a zip file. So let's call this my super cool Teams tab .zip. So I'm going to copy the path. I'm going to go to my SharePoint in the Teams. What I've done already, and that this will be obviously explained in the documentation, I enable site loading, and that means that I can actually go to a specific team site and I can upload the application or customization in the specific team. Well, not a team site, a specific team. In this case, we're using Microsoft Teams, and the team name is Team, which is slightly confusing, but anyway, you can see Team. I have plenty of other teams here as well, but I'm just using this one for demonstrational purposes. Now, if you would like to have that this tab visible across every single team in your Teams installation, you can actually upload that to the catalog here as well. So in the store, in the more apps, and you can upload that to be catalog, and then the web part, sorry, not a web part, the tab would be available across every single team in your solution. But in this case, we want to upload the custom app in here. So I'm going to actually upload that my super cool Teams tab, and uploading that as a manifest. I didn't touch anything in the manifest file. I'm using the default icons, logos designed by Vesa, so you can actually see those gears in here. It's just to indicate that it's a in development app. So now my cool Teams SIG demo is the application, and let's go to the Teams. Let's actually add our application. We can see it was my cool Teams SIG demo. Let's actually add that one on the as a tab on that Teams, because now it's available in the context. There's my description field. I can parameterize it in the same way as you can parameterize web parts. In our case, we used out-of-the-box web part, and that's it. And I'm going to click Save. So I'm not going to actually change the parameterization. And voila, poof, there's my custom team available in the Teams UI, and it works like a Teams. It works like a web part or a SharePoint web part. It looks exactly like the web part, except that based on our code, we're rendering a different output. In the SharePoint side, we said welcome to SharePoint, and in the Teams side, we're saying welcome to Teams. And this was because we actually had this logic here that if we are in Teams context, we're saying welcome to Teams. If we are in SharePoint context, we're saying welcome to SharePoint. But what's really cool when you think of it, I didn't actually write any specific code for Teams. I just took advantage of the hosting deployment mechanisms of SharePoint, the tenant by deployment. That's it, and that's basically available for anybody if I want in the implementation. Now, Russell has a question. So does the web part in the Teams have access on the lists in the associated site? Answer is yes. So if needed, this web part could also take advantage of saving, for example, data in the context of that team. It's because every single team, where do I actually see that? So let me go here. Every single team has a SharePoint site behind of it. So basically that the web part is being rendered in the context of the team, in the context of this particular SharePoint site behind of the team. Now technically the end users don't necessarily even never need to go to this site, but this is the same site which we use if you upload files to the Microsoft Teams. This is basically the information what is coming from that site. So your web part can take advantage of this. Can I get access on Microsoft Graph? Absolutely you can. Can I do a call third-party web APIs, which we released in SharePoint Framework 1.6? Absolutely you can. Anything what we have in SharePoint Framework is available in this context as well, because technically what we're seeing here is the same web part, same implementation rendered in the context of the SharePoint site behind of the team. So we're basically just an iframing that web part dynamically to be visible in the team. And now it's up to you what the web part actually does. So this particular web part is relatively simple, and it's relatively, well, basic. Now I was waiting for somebody to jump on the font issue. So the font, there is a small, let's say, a bug related on the fonts when we start in dev preview, which says that we do not load the Office UI Fabric fonts in this host page, which means that this looks slightly different than it looks in the in the SharePoint context, but you can actually easily fix that. We're looking into loading those fonts properly in this page as soon as possible. So super small thing. Why is it green? How did the color go green? If I go to this theme site, which was behind of the theme, the theme of this theme site is actually green. So basically, as I didn't set any theme settings to my web part, it basically inherited the theme from this particular SharePoint site, which is behind of the theme, and that's why it's green. So now if I actually would go and change this one to use an alternative theme, by default it would flip the color in here. Now, do you want that to happen? That's a different thing. Do you want to have a specific colors? Yeah, you can easily do that as well. But as I didn't change anything in a code, I'm basically using exactly the same code as the out-of-the-box web part creation, except that I'm just aware of the context. It's going to actually use, by default, the themes which are available. Now, like I said, this is as part of the 1.7. This will be in the 1.7 beta version, so plus beta, 1.7 plus beta, because this is in dev preview status. So this is not ready for production yet. We want to get your feedback for it before we actually ship it G8 as the way of creating tabs in the Microsoft Teams. But it really simplifies the model. Dash beta. It really simplifies the model of creating tab custom-based customizations in the Teams, and if your users prefer to use Teams, they can still access your business logic, business applications, and web parts, which are then just exposed basically as a theme tab. So we use the SharePoint framework, which after this will go GA, we might want to consider renaming SharePoint framework as a Office 365 framework or something else, and then we use the same framework for surfacing the same business logic in the two different locations based on your own preference. And that's insanely cool, right? Now, and maybe one additional note on that. So right now we started the collaboration with Teams people, and Teams is the first one which is adapting the SharePoint framework SharePoint framework way of doing things. We're looking into and having constant discussions with other teams as well. Because we want to make the deployment and hosting and everything else super easy for anybody who wants to just concentrate on their customization. And especially in the context of Office 365, there's always SharePoint underneath, so why wouldn't we take advantage of this implementation? So the Office add-ins, Pavel is mentioning the Outlook add-ins or Office add-ins. We're looking into potentially going that direction as well in the future. It's a logical discussion point. Now, when and has it been decided? It has not yet been decided, and it's a constant, it's an ongoing discussion how this should happen. But looking how simple it is to implement Teams tab, most likely we'll do the same for the additional services as well. Cool. I don't want to take more time because we want to make sure that Stefan has time for his content. So let's actually get back on the slides. I will answer the ongoing questions if I can keep up with them. So I'm going to flip back on the slides, and I think I'm handing it over to you, Patrick, unless I'm mistaken. Patrick, hello, Patrick.
Yeah. All right. Is that it?
Yeah, that's it. You didn't listen, man. There we go.
I did listen. I wasn't sure if you had another slide.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it anyway. So thank you for that. I'm going to answer the questions in our window while you go through the following slides. Thank you.
So quick updates before we get to the demo. So PnP JS client library updates. So we released 1.2.4 on November 2nd, which I believe was last Friday. I just wanted to say again, thank you and great work by the community. This was our largest community contributed release. That's probably an awkward way to say it, but we had the most community contributions in any release ever for the library. So that's really fantastic, and it's really exciting to see that continue to grow. I would, of course, encourage all of you, if you're interested, please do contribute. It really makes things expand and get better a lot faster than relying necessarily on the core team to get everything done. Some of the highlights: we've updated the ADL client internally to when you use the ADL client within SharePoint Framework 1.6. We're now going to use the new SharePoint Framework 1.6 AAD token provider. The big advantage there is no more pop-ups. So this was, we got some feedback around, wouldn't it be great if we could get rid of the pop-ups and help with the authentication experience? And we've done that. So if you're in SharePoint Framework 1.6, we now take advantage of that new capability, and it really is a much smoother experience. So great work by the product team there, and we were able to just sort of piggyback on that work and improve our stuff. If you're not in SharePoint Framework 1.6, that won't work, obviously, but you have the other capabilities are still available for you. You can create your own client with your own ID and secret, and these sorts of things will still work, but you will still have pop-ups. And that's, it's honestly just an architectural problem. We, as PnP, can't deploy the same kind of things the folks from the product team can to the servers to enable these kind of pop-up-less scenarios. So would encourage you to upgrade and use SharePoint Framework 1.6 if you have a need to call the graph, for example, or to call SharePoint, or to call other resources with an AAD authentication token. It's a great new capability. So I want to highlight that. As well, we have support now for site designs and site scripts, so applying those, which is really exciting to see. We got some great feedback around, number one, graph batching being broken, and then number two, some ways we could improve it once it was working. So appreciate that feedback. We were able to act on that last month. We've also expanded some of the graph capabilities, the endpoints that are supported. We've got documentation updates, got some improvements to the Node.js client. So the clients in the @PnP Node.js library, those have been updated and now have a little bit have better error handling and a little bit improved performance as well. So great stuff. And there's even more, so check out the changelog for all the details. And again, want to say thank you to everybody that contributed. And I did want to mention, because this happened a few times, and I really try to get it, but if you have contributed and you're not in the authors file, please let me know. It's an oversight on my part, and I apologize for that. But it has happened, and want to make sure it's not happening. So just let me know. It's a miss on my part. It's not a purposeful not inclusion of you, right, or something like that. So please just let me know. We'll get you added in there. No big deal. And then, so links down there at the bottom. The first one there, the pnp.github.io/pnpjs, is to our documentation. You can follow the hashtag PnPjs on Twitter. As well, you can follow me at MediocreBowler on Twitter. I don't tweet out a ton of stuff. It's mostly just related to this library, so you won't get a lot of spam from me. I do want to answer real quick this question: is PnPjs a requirement to utilize ADL.js stuff with no pop-ups? So no. PnPjs is not a requirement, so the stuff we're using is part of SharePoint Framework 1.6. You can use those things without the PnPjs library. So we are just, under the hood, updated our code to make use of those new capabilities, to not use the pop-ups. And in fact, it doesn't, you won't actually interact with ADL.js at all in your code anymore if you go down that route. As well, if you go down the PnPjs route, you won't need to interact with ADL.js on your own anymore either. But it is not a requirement. Of course, we hope you'll use PnPjs and use it, but not a requirement. So you can use that stuff in SharePoint Framework 1.6 absolutely without PnPjs. So it's the AAD HTTP client. As well, there's an AAD token provider. Those are both accessible off of the context object. There's a couple of methods called AAD Token Provider Factory and AAD HTTP Client Factory, I believe. So check those out. Awesome new capabilities. And as well, you can take advantage of those now in PnPjs if you like. But that is optional and not a requirement. So great questions. Number of rabbits the same as contributors? No, actually that would have been a really good Easter egg, but I didn't think of that. So you are more clever than me with that, but no, the number of rabbits is just sort of an ongoing joke. Or is it? The October PnPjs by the numbers. The top left column, or the top left graph there, is the number of requests and unique tenants per month. So we're up to 1.8 billion requests in the month of October across 5.9 or 5,900 tenants. So again, amazing growth over September, and that is all thanks to you in the community. So really, everybody's saying they lost video. Some folks are saying they still have it. Everything looks fine on my end, so I'm going to keep going. In the top right graph there is the number of NPM downloads so this is actually for the @PnP/SP library. I had to pick one to be representative, and we can see, again, great growth. So we had 11,000 downloads from NPM in the month of October, which in the realm of, if you talk about stuff like React and things like that, is not a large number, but for us is really impressive. It shows some great growth month over month, and then actually from when we started tracking this, it's some really fantastic growth. So appreciate that. Again, that's thanks to all of you. And the bottom graph there is the views of our specifically our PnPjs documentation. So that's going up as well, which shows me everybody is starting to find the new site and use that. So hopefully you found that helpful. And of course, if you have updates or suggestions or things missing in the documentation, please let us know. We'll do our best to get that updated just as quickly as we can. Moving up to updates on Office 365 CLI. New version 1.8.0 with commands for adding channels to teams, managing site classification, managing taxonomy, updating tenant settings, as well as managing webhooks. The cross-platform PnP starter kit setup script is still in progress, and more commands are also being worked on. Of course, if this is a great opportunity to contribute in the CLI, if you'd like to get involved, there's a lot of open issues marked as help wanted, so definitely encourage you to check those out. And the CLI is a nice place hopefully everywhere is a nice place to contribute, but the CLI is nice because each of the commands is fairly atomic, so you can work on one thing without necessarily having to learn how the entire library functions. So check that out. You can always install the latest versions from NPM. Get more information at the aka.ms0365CLI. There's also a hashtag on Twitter, Office365CLI. The Gitter IM channel, you can follow there as well. And then the docs are at that link, aka MS0365CLI. Update on the reusable controls. So if you haven't checked these out, there's two sets of controls, property controls and then React content controls. The property controls are designed to work in the property pane for your web part, so that's inside that editing experience. You can go check that out. That would be when you edit your web part, you've got these controls. These are all designed using the Office UI fabric, so you're going to get a nice out-of-the-box look. And then as well, will really save you some time, help you out in your building your applications and getting things started. So a lot of these are common asks. Why isn't there control to do X, Y, and Z? Well, now you can find them. This is also a great place to contribute if you have ideas for new property controls or as well new content controls, which is the other library of controls. And the content controls are designed to work in the body of your web parts, so either displaying data or otherwise providing a UI surface that would be interactive for your users as opposed to folks editing the web part. So please check out both of those libraries. Really good stuff. And then, of course, they're a great place to contribute, great place to provide feedback. The most used controls are the placeholder control, the web part title control, and then the people picker control. There's also taxonomy picker controls, color picker controls, some various different things. So really exciting stuff. Really save you a lot of time on your development efforts and give you a great out-of-the-box built-in look for your editing and content controls. So we did get a new field control, the list item picker. We were going to have that demoed on this call, but unfortunately I screwed up. I got my dates wrong, so we will get that onto a future call. But a great new control, so that was actually added from the community, and you can see that's number item 165. I think that'd be pull request 165. Do check that out. And then we have more information at 2 links down below. The SPFx property controls and the SPFx controls React. And I didn't mention these are all React-based controls, so do check those out. And sorry, I'm going to come down here and mute somebody. There we go. The last thing, I don't have updates for this today because we're about to see a demo on this, but we'll have updates on the calls for this going forward. So we have this, I said new to this call thing, but it's been now worked on for a few months by Stefan Bauer, and it's a yeoman generator. It's a community yeoman generator built on top of the out-of-the-box SharePoint Framework yeoman generator. So it's an extension of that generator. So out of this, you're going to get a valid SharePoint Framework project built on all the same libraries, just with a few different options for configuring the project and a few different frameworks available to get you started. But I don't want to steal his thunder, so I will turn things over to Stefan if he is ready.
Yes, if you can hear me.
I sure can. Great.
Okay, cool. Great.
Yeah, so if you want to take over the presentation, he's going to do a great demo and introduction to the generator.
Yes, present now. Yeah, all monitors shared, but so just a second. Be right there. Do you see my screen now?
Not yet.
Yet? You see?
Now it's starting loading.
Loading now.
Yeah.
Does it work now?
Almost. And I've got it.
Okay, great. So in 1.3, actually, we currently have the version 1.4, and there's something which you're much familiar with. So the Office 365 CLI has the SPFx project update, which allows you, when you have an existing project, to check what version you currently have in your project, and when you want to upgrade to 1.6 or 1.7, you can use this command out of the Office 365 CLI. When you have a really old project like I have here, I can check up the package.json and see, okay, it's version 1.4. But what we also did is with the yeoman generator, with the PnP SPFx generator, is to directly include the Office 365 CLI for project checking. So when I execute now on this really old project, the community generator, which requires the version 1.6, says, hey, sorry, you cannot proceed with me because it's based on version 1.6 right now. So we are looking also forward to upgrade it to 1.7. But instead, it does all the checking that the Office 365 CLI does. And what you see here, please review the file and upgrade log.md. So when I check my project root directory, I have here a markdown file which explain me in detail what steps I have to take to upgrade my project to the latest version. This is one of the benefits. And with the PnP SPFx generator, there'll come a lot of things together from PnP, what you will see in the next couple of seconds. So the latest addition to this, so it is pretty convenient because you don't have to update, don't have to run the Office 365 CLI manually, but instead you can, whenever you want to add a new web part or check what version the project is, you can execute PnP SPFx. But that's not all. So the latest update, I have here an empty folder, and the latest update we have is actually, we have now Angular elements in there. So when I say here now on this blank folder, PnP SPFx, then it gives me a lot of options. So we have here the handlebars, which was the first generator that has been built, and we have Vue.js, for example, in here that sets up a project to use Vue.js. But you can also use the default SPFx generator like the default SharePoint Framework 1.6 generator for Knockout, No Framework, and React.js. So, but let's check out this Angular experimental is there because we currently constantly improving the Angular Elements story and try to make it more better from a developer perspective. So the next step is I can select here now multiple libraries, and what you see, for example, whenever you start a new project with the PnPjs, then you can directly select it here and it will be included in your SPFx project. The PnP property controls that Patrick already mentioned are always there, because when a web part renders, then it's always by default React control. So the PnP property controls are not, you cannot only use in React projects, but you can use this library in all your projects. Okay. So the next thing is, what is your solution name? This is something specific to the Angular Elements generator, because we need to first check the solution before the SPFx generator runs, because what we do with the Angular Elements generator, we create two projects there instead of one SPFx project. So I'm fine now with ng Angular Awesome 2. And one concern for Angular developers is always, hey, I want to use my CLI and I want to set up my project with additional parameters. So because we create two projects where you can actually, in the Angular project, you can use the CLI as you're used to as an Angular developer. When we set up the project for you, you can pass here some additional properties in there, how your Angular project should be generated. So in this case, we have defaults for style to make it as CSS. Then we don't want to have routing in there, and it also shouldn't include directly a Git repository. And now what you see now is actually the base default 1.6 generator. So I can say now SharePoint Online, latest version, tenant deployment. I want to create a web part. What is your web part name? Hello world, description. And then what you see now, the first part is generated by the SPFx framework. Now what you see, we created an ng awesome 2 file directory where we create a new Angular project. To save time, I currently already did this, so we have here two projects now. Let me open this in code. So the ng awesome project is a standard Angular project when you say, hey, create me please a new Angular project. The SPFx project is actually a completely SPFx SharePoint Framework project. So when I go now to ng awesome and say here ng serve and start my Angular project in debug mode, then it first builds. And then I have here, now it's done, so I can navigate to this URL, localhost 4002. You see this default, this component that we by default generate here. So let's do something in here. So this is stored in the ng pro awesome. It's in the source folder. The Angular elements are actually something like web components you might heard of. So we have an HTML template here that takes, for example, the description of a web part, like the hello world web part does. And when I do something like this, so like this one, and say lorem 15, lorem, and save my project, it should actually rebuild. Let's do a break here. And this is how the component is can be built directly with all the Angular goodies that are in the framework. Okay. So any Angular developer actually can write you now a component for your SharePoint Framework web part. So this is embedded on the index.html. And the whole idea behind web components is to write custom elements to the native HTML elements that are available, which is actually the future. So there is not much change on the HTML elements in future, but rather than you can write your own elements that you want to use. Yeah, and this is actually the component that we can include in our SharePoint web part. So when I'm done with developing my web part, I can go here, stop the debugger, and say npm run bundle. And what this actually does, it creates a production build, a library, that I can use in my SPFx web part. So what it actually does here, it builds a production-ready library, and then bundles all the different components like main.js, polyfills, runtime script, styles, and vendor.js to a single file. Okay? Now when I go back to my Angular project, here, I have here in the dist folder a bundle file, which is minimized and optimized and everything in there. This file is really small because it only has 280 kilobytes, something like that, okay? So, how do we bring this over to our SPFx project? What you see in the Angular project, and every Angular project is also a package.json, okay? So you have here all the dependencies, you have a name, you have a version number, you have here a bundle task, for example. But because this has a package.json, you can npm install it from wherever you like. So you don't always have to install packages directly from the web, from npm.js. You can also install npm packages from GitHub, or you can also use local repos here. And when we look over to the ng-awesome SPFx project, what we have in here in the package.json, we have a reference directly to ng-awesome, which says file.ng-awesome, which points us directly to this folder. So whenever I build a new project in here, I don't need to copy it over, wire up things, but I can directly use it like I normally use any library in there. In the web part, you see the webpart.ts, and what we actually do is we import here the ng-awesome dist ng-awesome bundle, which is located in the other project in here. Okay? So whenever I build in the Angular project a new version, then this automatically gets included in my SPFx project. And then what we do in the render method here is we just create the project. The base project is a non-HTML standard project, and what we do is we simply render here this new custom element on our page. So when I go now over to my ng-awesome -SPFx project and say here go observe, which takes a couple of seconds. Let's set this. I can now select the Hello World web part, and what you see here, it says it works. We have the description here, so I can go in here and say edit hello Angular, and you see it automatically gets updated over here in the web part. So actually, the idea is when I want to write more components, then, I mean, this makes somewhat sense when I write just one component, but you can also write a lot of Angular components or company-wide components all in Angular, and then embed it directly in the SPFx project. Okay. Any questions?
Thanks. That was really fantastic stuff. I'm going to go ahead and take back over just so we can close out the call. But folks, if you haven't checked that out, it's really great, and it has a lot of neat capabilities that don't come with the out-of-the-box SharePoint Framework Yeoman generator. But again, is a nice extension of that functionality. Really cool work there, and of course, open to contributions as well. So if you have ideas or want to improve that or help with that, please do. Definitely welcome that. So no time today for the Q&A, unfortunately. But next, there we go. Our next JavaScript special interest group meeting will actually be November 22nd, which for those of you in the United States is Thanksgiving, typically a holiday. We will have a call. It's likely to be a little more lightly attended, but we will have a call. And then the next general SharePoint special interest group is next Thursday, November 15th. So look forward to seeing everybody at both of those calls. So thank you all very much for your time. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll talk soon. Bye.